Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha Priti, and I'm here with a family of seekers, and we are studying the Bhagavad Gita together and talking about its relevance to our lives today. This timeless wisdom that is still super relevant to our lives and helps us to upgrade our lives. So we finished chapter 4 last time, and today we're going to do the chapter 4 overview. And the last time I did a chapter overview, we read a lot of the text. This time I'm going to go through all the text, but I'm going to do it from like a conceptual basis. So we'll talk about like the key points from all the texts and the key concepts from all the text, and so that you guys can kind of see how they all string together to form chapter 4. And also, kind of refresh your memory on a lot of the things that we've talked about. So, like always, if you want to talk or if you want to share anything, please just raise your hand, or you can just talk because the way that I do my screen now, I don't always see your hands raised during the class. So, feel free to just talk. Okay, great. So, let's get started. All right. Whew, it's a little bit weird not doing text. This is a whole different thing for me. Gotta get reorientated here. Okay, so if we remember when we first started chapter 4 is called Transcendental Knowledge, right? If we remember when we first started, it started with Krishna explaining the disciplic succession. So he talked about he talked about where this knowledge was originally spoken. He originally spoke it to the sun god like over 120 million years ago, and then it was passed down a couple times, and then somewhere in there it got lost, and then it was respoken. Krishna respoke it to Arjuna 5,000 years ago. Okay, so those all the details of that isn't so important as the point here that Krishna is establishing the credibility of the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. The knowledge is in the Bhagavad Gita. He's by mentioning this lineage, he's emphasizing that true spiritual knowledge comes from a trusted, authentic source. It can't just be something that, somebody just makes up and decides to be an influencer and just speaks whatever they want. Right? It's passed down in this disciplic succession. The knowledge is preserved and it's not distorted. So that's super important. And this stresses the need for proper guidance under a genuine spiritual teacher. And then as we moved on to 4.2, he talks a little bit more about this system and kind of defines disciplic succession in that, a teacher teaches a student and then the student becomes the teacher. And that's disciplic succession. When we say that word, that's kind of what we're talking about, the chain that happens when a teacher teaches a student and then the student becomes a teacher and teaches a student and so forth. The principle is that the knowledge has to be communicated correctly. It has to be preserved. The integrity of the knowledge has to be preserved. So the students have to be pretty good so that we can preserve the knowledge. Again, somewhere in this chain that didn't happen and it had to be respoken. But that's what's the text is saying here. So then when we move on to 4.3, we talk about the importance of a bona fide guru. The knowledge is received through the disciplic succession, or parampara, and it's meant for devotees. And he emphasizes in this text, Krishna emphasizes in this text, that he gives this knowledge to Arjuna because he is a devotee and a friend. And this is a really important point, that trust is a prerequisite for knowledge. Spiritual knowledge is best understood by those who have a personal, loving relationship with the teachers or divinity, because it's transferred through the heart. Remember, it's not like a mind thing. It's not so much our intellect. I mean, our intellect can be a tool to help us, but really the goal here, what we're trying to do is open our heart and transform the heart. And so we have to have these loving, trusting relationships are super important. So that's the point here. Krishna calls this knowledge a transcendental mystery. So he's saying it's not ordinary information that we can just understand through logic. We need to have grace, faith, and a purified heart to really fully comprehend it. We should recognize this spiritual knowledge as a gift. In that way, it's not something that we can get solely by our own endeavor, right? It's a gift, it's not an entitlement, and we need to approach it with gratitude and humility. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can approach with openness and reverence, the more that it will reveal its deeper meaning to us. So that's kind of the first section on 4:1 through 4:3. Now we'll move on to Krishna's transcendental birth and activities, which is text 4 through 9. Does anybody want to share anything before I move on? Am I going too fast? Is this an okay pace? You guys feeling good? Okay. All right, let's move on to 4:4 through 4:9. Okay, so we learned
Yeah,
all about this. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. I'm sorry to jump in.
please.
Thank you. Um, I just love the re-mention of Krishna as a friend, um,
Mm,
and how that just takes so much like pressure away, and how it kind of encapsulates all the time, constant, loving with no conditions, and such a close relationship. So thanks.
yeah, yeah, it's so approachable. Right? I
Yeah,
love that you said that. And it's like the
yeah.
whole premise of the Gita, right? Is because Krishna is appearing as a friend to Arjuna, and they're just friends having this
Mm.
conversation. And yeah, I agree. I feel that same way. It's not like we have to approach God from like this awe and reverence. We could do that too, but to know that He's your friend, it really there's a lot of permission there to kind of
Yeah,
just like be.
it is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to share before we move to the next section?
I was just
Okay.
thinking how you said it's a gift and
Mm.
uh and how much that helps open up our heart because then we have to like keep practicing gratitude for it and gratitude is just always helps open our heart. So
Wow.
since Katie shared, I figured I'd share that too.
That's a really nice point. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point.
To always be thankful for it and then our heart's always open so then we're always able to keep receiving more.
Yes. Very nice connection. Anybody else? Okay, so then we moved on to this next section, Krishna's transcendental birth and activities. And this is where, if you remember, Arjuna kind of questioned Krishna a little bit. He's like, "How did you speak this to the sun god? That was 120 million years ago. And so Krishna highlights, in response to Arjuna's question here, he highlights his supreme position. So he talks about the key points from these verses. He talks about how his form and appearance are transcendental. So both Arjuna and Krishna have had many lives, but Krishna remembers and Arjuna forgets. And that's the difference there. Right? As us living entities, as our soul enters another body, it's like a reset. Right? We like clean the slate. We don't remember our past lives. But Krishna remembers everything because Krishna's body is spiritual and our body is material. So his body exists at a spiritual level. And in that, it's such ananda. It's eternal. It's full of knowledge. It's blissful. That's the composition of his body. It's again, it's kind of hard to even grasp because we can't relate to it on a material plane. But we should know that when Krishna appears, when God appears, he's inherently different than we are because he is spiritual and we are material. He's unborn. So even when he appears, it's not like he's taking birth like regular humans do. He's appearing. So his body's not material and it doesn't change like our bodies do. So we really even it's easy for us to kind of like see these pastimes or hear about God and maybe put it into a little bit of a material realm, but we should understand how different it is because it's spiritual. It's like a whole different dimension. And when he appears, when God appears, it's by his own will. It's not by his karma like us. When our souls go from body to body, we choose a body based off of our karma, the karma that we've acquired in that past life or in other past lives throughout our journey, basically, and our desires. That's how our souls choose a body. But Krishna appears just because he wants to, not because he has to, not because he's bound by these karmic laws. He appears, and he says in 4:7, he appears when there's a decline in religious practices, when there's disorder in the world. In religion, social order, people stop performing their duties, things like that. Just when people's consciousness starts really degrading and it's chaotic, he comes to correct imbalance in human society. So in general, he expects us to kind of manage ourselves, but when it becomes unmanageable, he comes. And this is his universal mission. And this is what's talked about in text 7 and 8. Okay, so that's his universal mission. Now, he has a personal mission. And this is what's talked about in 4:9. His personal mission is to come to liberate humanity. So where the first mission we talked about to come and kind of restore order in society, this first mission is mandatory. Like everybody must follow it, right? It's like the laws of a government. But the second mission when he comes to liberate people, this is more for spiritual seekers. So this is optional. So we have to choose to buy into this. We have to choose to follow this path, to reap this benefit, to receive this gift that he's giving us. So if we do, those who understand his divine nature, 4:9, says that we attain liberation and don't take birth again. So if we choose to buy in, if we choose to accept the gift, and we choose to understand his divine nature, then we'll attain liberation and not take birth again. And again, this is so important concept that we revisit it again and again. It's not like just saying, okay, I understand and I know. It's not like just a brain thing, right? It's a heart thing. So it's not just like declaring, okay, I understand his divine nature. I hear what you're saying. I get that. No, it's deeper than that. So when we say, how do we know we know? We know by what we love. Right? And what we love is where we're putting our time, our consciousness, our care. That's what we love. Like I have a child. I love her. She's like pretty much all I think about during the day. Like, I mean, there's exceptions, but she consumes a large part of my okay, what am I going to do? What does she need? What's this kind of thing? That's love. So when we love God, same thing, he's on our mind. We're remembering. We're engaging in spiritual practices. We're studying. We're chanting. We're meditating. We're doing things to connect us to God. That's how we know we know. If we really understand these things, if we really understand that Krishna is spiritual and he comes for these missions and, all these things we're talking about, if we really understand what that means to us in our lives, we love. And we know we love by where we put our consciousness and where we put our time. So it's not something that's like superficial or like, surface deep. We want to go deeper and deeper to where he's always in our consciousness. And that's how we know we love. Okay, so that's 4:9. 4:10 talks about liberation through knowledge of Krishna. So again, by understanding God, we become further purified and attain love for him. When we take shelter of him, we become free from our unhealthy attitudes toward the world. So we don't have to like artificially let go of fear, anger, attachment. These things just kind of subside because we're so in love. And that's the process. In the same way that like material love, you meet somebody who makes you a better person. You just want to do right by them because you care for them so much. And that just makes you perform at a higher level, right? You're maybe a little bit more selfless. You're maybe a little bit more understanding, a little bit more tolerant. These things. When we fall in love with God, all of our lower nature, our lower nature just kind of dissipates. It kind of like fades. And when when we really reach that stage, when we really reach prema, it's gone. Our fear, anger, attachment, because Krishna is the ultimate God or the ultimate love, right? God is the ultimate love. So that is 4:4 through 4:9. Before we move on to the next section, does anybody want to share anything? Okay, we will move on to the next section. So the next section is verses 11 through 15. This is where we talked about Krishna being the goal and the creator of all the paths. This is where we talked about Varnashram system, right? The kind of material system that he creates for us to live independently and exhibit our partial independence. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning here. Verse 11. Verse 11, Krishna talks about how he reciprocates with all beings. He says, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So here he's saying he's not partial, he's reciprocal. So if somebody wants help, he gives it. If somebody reaches out, like a child reaching out, he'll give it. But if somebody doesn't listen and if somebody pushes him aside and somebody's kind of turning their back, they're not real interested, he may take a little bit of distance, right? Like a child, like a mother and a child or a mother and a grown child. If the grown child is reaching out, calling all the time, the mom's, maybe going to be a little bit more active. But if that's not happening, then maybe the mom gets in and gives a little bit of distance, right? I'm thinking of my own mom when I say this because we've been through all of these ups and downs, right? So this God's the same way. He's not partial, but he's reciprocal. He'll reciprocate according to how much we reach out. But the love is always there. And God offers people opportunities to come to him from wherever they are. No one is disqualified. So in this verse, we also talked about how while everybody's on God's path, not all paths lead to Krishna. Okay, so we need to pick one and stick with it to really get that benefit. We talked about that mountain. Remember the bottom, the material is at the bottom of the mountain, the material realm, and the top of the mountain is the spiritual realm. And there's all different kinds of paths. Some of them maybe lead around the mountain. Some of them maybe kind of zigzag up a little bit, maybe halfway stop. Some go to a waterfall, right? But we need to pick that path that goes up to the top of the mountain, and we need to stick with it. And as we start to elevate ourselves a little bit, we'll even gain more understanding of other paths that are maybe at that same point, but they got there a different way. So that's what this verse is saying. Krishna is the goal and creator of all paths. So then we move on to text 12. Text 12 points out that people commonly approach God and spirituality for material desires, like wealth, success, personal gain. It's like when we pray for the things that we think we want. I want a good husband. I want a child. I want a nice house. I want this job. And that's not bad, but it's not the highest. So we talked about even when we pray, if we want to pray for these things, we can even just preface it with, if this is your will, because that's what we're really training ourselves to do here, right? Is to align with God's will. So it doesn't mean that we can just artificially suppress these things, but we know that the relationship that we want with God is one of complete trust. That's where we're really trying to go. We may not be there yet, but we're trying to go there. And in that complete trust, that means that we know that he's our greatest well-wisher, that he's looking out for us, that he's the all-knowing, and therefore he knows what's best for us. So Krishna is saying that in this verse in 12, that these desires shouldn't be the ultimate goal. This wealth, success, personal gain, this shouldn't be the ultimate goal. That's not the highest. It's not bad, but it's not the highest. Okay, so then he goes into talking about the Varnashram system in 413. So he talks about how he made the system for us to gradually elevate ourselves, rid ourselves of our attachments, and to harmonize with society. So here we talked about the 4 divisions of human society. We talked about Brahmanas, the like teachers, Kshatriyas, like the protectors of society, like the warriors. That's what Arjuna is. Vaishyas, that's like the businessmen, the farmers. Sudras, like the laborers, like the people that work for the other people. Okay, and the point of these different classifications is not like so one's better than the other, or it's to create some kind of competitive society. No, it's quite the opposite, actually. It's so that everybody can be situated in their rightful position, right? According to their karma, according to what they're good at, what they're attracted to. They can work in accordance with that. And when we're working in accordance with that, we get a certain level of internal satisfaction that keeps us satisfied, that kind of keeps us on the road. So we want to do that. We want to we want to find our dharma, and we want to act in accordance with our dharma so that we can just be happy in this material existence. Understanding that the most happiness exists above this material existence, but while we're navigating around, we still need to be mindful of who we are and who we're not, and kind of work in accordance with that. So that's why God created these 4 divisions of human society. And we can also understand this through personality tests and aptitude tests and these things that we take so that we can be rightly situated in a way that's conducive to our skills and what we like to do. So he created this, so we could just say he created this system so that we can all work like that. And then also we can all harmonize with society so that there's a good mix of different contributions because the society needs that. So it's to kind of like maintain order both internally and externally. So God's saying that he's the creator of this system, but he's the non-doer. So while a person has human talents and abilities, they're born with, right? That's not God. Those are created by God, but God is not the doer. So God's creating a structure, but people's own karma is placing them in that structure. So it's like you create like the government is created, the laws of the government are created. But when, a criminal does something bad, it's not the government that is responsible for that, right? The criminal went against, whatever he was supposed to, the law, and therefore reaps the consequence. So that's like karma for us. And it's not necessarily always, it's not so severe like a criminal, but whatever we're doing, we're going to be placed in the system accordingly. And it's not God placing us in the system. God created the system. And therefore, we're responsible for wherever we land in the system based off of our past reactions, right? Based off of the karma that we're now getting. Okay, but then God is above this. So he's like the creator, the maintainer, but he's not in this system. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, great. So then we'll move on to 4:14. Krishna's beyond the karma. So although he acts, he's not bound by our karma. He's not entangled. He's not motivated by desire. And if you understand this position, if you understand that he's the creator, he's the maintainer, he's not bound by karma, he's above all of this, like, right, like a king who makes rules, but I don't know, he's just the maintainer. He's not like bound by everything. If you understand this position, you'll be free from karma. This is the power of transcendental knowledge. This is what 4:14 is saying. Those who follow Krishna's path are purified. So in 4:15, he says, those who follow Krishna's path are purified. Previous liberated souls followed Krishna's teaching, and Arjuna is encouraged to do the same. So that's what 4:15 is. So this section right here really talks about the material system that God created for us because we wanted it, right? We want to be independent. So he created this system for us to purify ourselves of our attachments and for society to harmonize at large, and also establishes his position in that he's not bound by the system that he created. He created it for us. He created it selflessly. He has no material desires. He's completely independent of it all, yet he created it all. And whatever we do within that, it's not him doing it to us. It's the result of our own karma. And maybe the karma, maybe we haven't, maybe not even karma that we just received in this life, but maybe karma from past lives that we don't even know. But whatever is happening, it's not God coming in and doing it. It's our karma. Okay? So that's what we're to understand here in this section, 11 through 15. Does anybody want to share anything? Okay, we'll move on to the next section then. 16 through 24. So this is the section that we talked about these definitions of action, inaction, and forbidden action. If you guys remember that, we talked about, so action is this word we use is karma. This is the same word, but it's a slightly different meaning. So when we say karma here, we're talking about a person's prescribed duty, like their dharma. So work that's like along with prescribed duties, but it still causes bondage. So it's like basically what we're doing in this material existence, whether it's good or bad, whatever kind of karma we're getting, we may be getting both. It's that work, those kinds of activities. But it's keeping us bound to this material existence because we're accruing karma. So we're kind of living that out. Okay, so that's the first. It's action. Okay. When we talk about inaction, that word is akarma. And this means acting without attachment to the results. So when we're not materially motivated. So this is like that selfless action. This is like the perfection of karma yoga, right? When we can act in a completely detached mood, when we can act with selfless service to God. This is a karma. So we may still be externally acting, but internally we're not attached to the results. And that's where this word inaction, akarma, comes from. Okay, and the third definition here is vikarma. This is forbidden actions. This is like things that we just shouldn't be doing, like criminal activity or things that are just bringing everybody down, us and others down. Okay, so these three words: karma, doing our prescribed duty, but we're accruing karma. We're in this material existence. We're moving around based off of our attachments and our desires. Okay, akarma, we're moving around, but just out of selfless love or selfless service. Maybe not love yet. That's more like bhakti, but selfless service, right? Actually, the perfection of akarma is, yeah, we could say that too. So anyway, we're detached. Akarma is when in action, we're detached. And vikarma, forbidden action. So then this next verse, 4:18, says that a truly wise person sees inaction in action and action in inaction. And this is kind of a confusing play on words kind of thing. But when we dissect the meaning here, what the text is saying, when the text says inaction, it means we're externally acting but not being bound. So this is like a police officer who shoots criminals because it's his job, because he has to, because he's in a situation where it's absolutely required, not because it's something that he just wants to do for his own personal satisfaction, right? He's doing it out of duty. He's doing it out of service. So the text here is saying that a wise person can see this. A wise person can see inaction in action. It means externally acting but not being bound. Okay. The other part of the text here, 4:18, says that a wise person can see action in inaction. This means externally appearing inactive while actually being karmically entangled. So this is like a police officer who's mute at the crime scene, who doesn't do anything, even though it's his duty. Okay, so we can kind of see where this could be Arjuna. If he's it's called action in inaction, meaning that externally he may not be doing anything, but he's still karmically entangled. So it's kind of changing the context of these words a little bit, the meaning of these words. When you say inaction and action, it's more referring to if we're karmically entangled or not. And what the text is saying is that if we're doing something selflessly, if we're doing something out of pure service and no material motive, then we're not karmically entangled. And that's what this text is saying. A wise person knows that. A wise person sees that. So then when we move to text 19 through 21, this theme continues. True renunciation is acting without attachment. So the selfless worker is not entangled in karma and is satisfied with whatever comes by Krishna's arrangement. His actions are truly selfless. And that means that he's working in the larger interest, not just for himself, but the larger interest. He's acting dutifully. And this is that verse we talked about. Such a person's knowledge is like a fire that burns away the reactions. And in that way, the person stays free. Okay, so we talked about that seed that's like roasted, that karmic seed that's like roasted by knowledge. And in that way, the karma is burned away. We talked here, if we remember, how when a person acts, they get different karma. They'll get an external result, right, from their action, but they'll also get like an inner inclination. So if you like stole something and you had some success, you're going to get an inner inclination that, oh, that was a good thing, that worked for me. And then you're going to do it again, right? So you get like a desire. But if we're doing things selflessly, if we don't have a material desire, and we're working in that knowledge, then that seed gets roasted because those desires aren't there anymore. So we're not going to continue on that karmic cycle. So that's that analogy where we talked about that seed that's roasted. So the Gita says such a person's knowledge is like a fire. So again, just having this knowledge working in this detached mood, understanding why we're working in this detached mood, it's like a fire that burns away the reactions. And in that way, a person stays free. So that's what this section is saying. And when we talked about this, we talked a lot about non-attachment. Remember, we talked about what non-attachment is and what it's not. So non-attachment, it's not being lazy. It's not lethargy. It's not having like an I don't care attitude. And it's not neglecting our responsibilities. It's really acting as if we have total control and we're completely engrossed, but not being attached to the outcome, right? Giving it all to God, accepting, divine arrangement. So it's tricky because on the outside, we want to look like we're all in, but on the inside, and that's what the Gita is so focused on here. What's going on the inside? On the inside, we're detached. And we're not detached because we don't care. We're detached because we trust in something higher. And that's the difference here. So as we go on to the next verse, we talk about simple living, taking only what we need so that we can focus on a higher purpose. So we all have different levels of comforts, like material comforts that we need. So it's just kind of getting honest about that. What's conducive to our ultimate goal, to our spiritual life? What's not? What's kind of distracting us or causing us anxiety or holding us back? And kind of prioritizing our life accordingly. Practicing non-possessiveness. So this possessiveness is a mindset. Like we could have lots of possessions. We could have lots of opulences, but not have a possessive mentality. And there's so many kings, like examples in the Bhagavatam of kings that had this. They had everything at their fingertips, every opulence they could have ever imagined. But they were able to walk away from it all. It wasn't even theirs in that way. So that's what we want to practice. This we don't want to be possessive. And also we talked about not just possessions, not just physical material items, but relationships, things, we need to know that we're not the owner, we're not the controller, we're not the enjoyer. And when we engage in this material existence, it's in service to something higher. And in that way, we're purified. So not having desires or having a calm mind all comes when we don't have attachments. That's the message of this section. And then the next section, we're going to start talking about yagyas, sacrifices that purify action. Does anybody want to share anything about that section before I move on? Okay. I will move on then. So this is a little section. This is text 22 through 24. 22 says that if we're satisfied with what comes of its own accord, if we're free from duality, if we don't envy, if we're steady in both success and failure, then we won't be entangled, even if we're out there acting in the world. So a couple things here that we talked about that I think could be really helpful to us if we could really hear and imbibe them is this concept of accepting whatever comes by divine will. So we do the best that we can. We do the best that we can. And then whatever happens after that, we accept that this is God's arrangement. And we know that God's our biggest well-wisher. He's the all-knowing. So whatever happens, we trust in that. So we still do our best. But however the cookie crumbles, right? However the cards fall, we know, okay, that was divine arrangement. This was something before my husband and I had a child. It was something that we kind of come to terms with because we tried for years. We tried for like 4 years, and we didn't know if it was going to happen or not. And the next step for us was like IVF, which we just, for whatever reason, we decided that we weren't going to go that route. And so we were like, okay, whatever happens, we have to accept this. This is what God wanted for us. And then it ended up happening, But this can be really difficult, but it can also be really satisfying, knowing that we're not the controllers and having that trust in God. And to the degree that we can have that trust, to the degree that we can relieve, we can let go of our anxiety in this life, we can let go of this constant need, this constant, like, I'm going to be happy if this happens or not happens, the more that we can trust and the more that we can secure our destiny in future lives, the more that we can ensure that we're heading that direction. We're going towards God. We're walking on God's path towards him, giving him that trust over our lives. And wanting that, right? Wanting that. So it's a practice. It's a practice for us all. And you'll see different obstacles in your life that give you the opportunity to refine that mindset a little bit more, like to trust in God a little bit more. And then the next point is a key to being steady is non-envy. Okay, so this is another thing. One of the ways to go beyond envy is by understanding karma. So when we get on Instagram and we automatically see somebody who has this and this and this, and looks like they live such an opulent life, goes on all of these vacations, and we start wondering, why I want to do that? Why can't I do that? Why don't I have that great career or that big family or whatever it is that looks so great on the other side? We have to understand that everybody has their own karma. They have their own karma and we have their own karma. We have our own karma. So this concept of being jealous of somebody or comparing or, it's not even in our domain. Like people have their own karma in the same way that we do. It's not for us to, wish away or, say, it should be this way or I need this or no, we have to accept that we have our own karma and they have their own karma. And if any control that we want over it is really just surrendering to God, right? That's what's going to bring us the highest. That's what's going to bring us the most happy. That's how we're going to let go of that like comparison mentality, that like I'm not good enough kind of mentality. It is just surrendering to God, giving it all to God. And in that way, we get out of this karmic loop completely. Okay, so it doesn't even really make sense to envy if we understand how karma works, is the point here. So then when we move on to 23 says that the work of a person who is free from attachment, has their consciousness and knowledge, and is working as a sacrifice, their work merges into transcendence. So it's saying here that the work is no longer in the material domain. It goes beyond karma. The work is made into something spiritual. So we talked about we live at a material plane and here's a spiritual plane. The bridge that takes us from the material to the spiritual is sacrifice. And this is how we're elevated. So when we're working in that kind of a mindset and selfless service to God, that work is made into something spiritual. So then we get to this next. Does anybody want to share anything before I move on to this next section? This next section is where we talked about all the sacrifices. And I'm not going to go into all the sacrifices because some of them are not even really so much for us in this day and age, or we may not even be able to relate to so much. We talked about pranayama, like the breathing sacrifices, and Ashtanga yoga and we talked about material sacrifices, which we can relate to, charity or things like that. One of the sacrifices that we talked about that we really can relate to probably the most in this whole section is sacrificing by regulation. So offering our talents to divinity. So if you like music, listen to spiritual music. If you like cooking, offer your food to God. Whatever it is, try to offer what you're doing, somehow dovetail it into the service of God. And then also regulating things that bind us to this material existence, right? Like our sex life, regulating your sex life. This is, marriage, just having one partner. Maybe eating only things that have been offered to God. Controlling our desires and our attachments. These kinds of things. So this is what's recommended for us householders is to sacrifice by regulation. And in this section, we talked again about a lot of other sacrifices. We talked about the sacrifices for a brahmachari who's completely turning all of his senses inwards, right? And lots of other ones that if you want to kind of review the sacrifices, you could look into that 25 through 32. But we'll just stick with that one for now because that's the main point I think that most of us can relate to is the sacrifice by regulation. And the point here is that sacrifice purifies the performer and leads to transcendental knowledge. And that's what God says in 30 to 32. The senses keep us tied to material existence. So if we want to be elevated to an eternal platform full of knowledge, bliss, and life, we have to be situated on a different platform. And that platform is the eternal atmosphere. So all of the sacrifices that we talked about help one to become cleansed of the sinful reactions of material existence. And when we know the purpose of sacrifice, our karma will go away. And this is what helps one to become happy and opulent in this life, but also into the spiritual world afterlife. We all become purified and liberated. And purified means removing the impurities that cloud our spiritual nature. So this comes from attachments, desires, ignorance of our relationship with God. And all of these sacrifices culminate in transcendental knowledge and liberation. So without the performance of sacrifice, one can't be happy. We talked about that a lot, right? We experience that even in this material domain. So when we're sacrificing, we're the most happy. You know, if our consciousness is at that level, that's what we'll experience. The most happiness comes from selfless sacrifice. And the highest sacrifice is sacrifice to God, because God is the all-knowing. God is like the reservoir of love. So if we could sacrifice for God, we experience the highest happiness that we can. But we can even experience it in this material domain just by practicing that principle. Sacrifice for your family, sacrifice for your kids, sacrifice for your country. These things make us better. They elevate us. We see that. So what to speak of sacrificing for God, the highest. So then the next section, 33 through 42, we talked about the supreme sacrifice, knowledge. So in that previous section, remember, we talked about all different kinds of sacrifices, sacrifices of breathing, sacrifices of the body, of the mind, all these different things. Now, Krishna is saying that knowledge is superior to material sacrifices. Sacrifices performed with knowledge, and again, knowledge is defined as knowledge of the soul, knowledge of the super soul, God in the heart, and the relationship between the two. So if we can perform sacrifices with this knowledge, that yields the highest results. And sacrifice with knowledge is better than without because it leads to the development of knowledge. Like if we're sacrificing and we don't really know why, we're not going to be elevated as much. Because if we're sacrificing with knowledge, it kind of reinforces the knowledge that we have. That's kind of the point. So people who engage their intellect are better because it's this intellectual faculty which will be used to redirect our heart from matter to Krishna. So it's like if we're just giving in charity just to give, that's good. But if we're giving in charity and we really know the reason behind it and we know and we're connected to that, then it's just going to reinforce that in our lives, right? And we're going to elevate more. So we want to sacrifice with this knowledge because we want to reinforce this knowledge. That's what we're doing here. And that's how we're going to build this knowledge. So it's going to grow and we're going to become more realized. So then we talked about how to attain this knowledge. Attain this knowledge by approaching this bona fide spiritual master. So we talked about having a guru. And when we approach him, the process, the mood that we have to have when we approach him, the process to get this knowledge is serving him with humility and inquiring submissively. So humility enables a guru to show us the way. Inquisitiveness enables us to start seeing the way ourselves. And this service attitude enables us to move along the way. So we need those three components, those three aspects: humility, inquisitiveness, service. And the spiritual master enables us to turn towards God through his own example and his own connection with God. So it's a link not just of the head, but of the heart. And the guru imparts transcendental knowledge, which destroys ignorance. We talked about this knowledge. When we acquire knowledge, there's freedom from illusion. So we're free of the illusion that these things in this material existence are really going to satisfy us completely, satisfy our soul completely. And we see all living beings in God. This is spiritual vision. We see everybody as belonging to God, including ourselves. This is the result of acquiring knowledge. This is where we want to get to. And this is how a guru can help us get there. The next verse 36 says that this process is so exalted that anybody can become liberated. So nobody's too low to benefit from this. And there's so many examples of people in scripture who, were pretty sinful people, but they met a devotee, they got some mercy, and they were just quickly elevated. So you're never too sick to take the medicine. And there's nothing as pure as this transcendental knowledge. That's what the next verse says, 439. There's nothing as pure. When one realizes this, when one fully accomplishes this, they delight within themselves. We again, this is a concept that's hard for us to really even imagine, is just being content within and therefore not needing anything without. If we could really just kind of understand this or even kind of relate to this at all, right? That the soul is naturally joyful and that this joy can be experienced when one starts connecting with God. And so when we get to this point where our knowledge we've acquired so much knowledge that we fully realize this, we fully realize our constitutional position, and that's what we're living from. We don't need anything else. We're just joyful naturally. We've completely uncovered this covering on the soul of our attachments, our desires. And it's just the qualities of the soul are just naturally resonating out. This is the highest. And this happens in due course of time, he says. This happens in due course of time. So be patient, stick to the process, understand it's not like an instant thing, like everything else, like everything in this material existence. We have to stick to the process, we have to have faith, and we have to move forward in that way. And that's what the next verse says, is that faith is essential for spiritual progress. So the faithful attain knowledge and liberation. And we talked about how faith leads to knowledge and knowledge leads to faith. So we need a little bit of faith to start the process, to go forward, to get this knowledge. And then the more knowledge that we acquire, the more faith that we get. It reinforces. And these two things work together. They feed off of each other. So faith leads to knowledge and knowledge leads to faith. And just saying that we have faith is not enough. Just saying, oh, I believe in God, and then just like going about your regular lives and not really giving the process much time. That's not enough, right? That's like a very preliminary level of faith. If we have faith, if we truly have faith, then that's reflected in our actions. That's reflected in how we spend our time. That's reflected in where our heart is. That's reflected in how our heart is transforming. So again, it's a process and we have to stick to it. We have to commit to it. We have to make time for it. And then we'll see the benefits. So then the next verse 40, talks about the danger of doubts. It says if we're doubting, if we're going through the process, but we're constantly doubting it, we're in trouble. People that have doubts, this verse says we can't be happy in this life or in next lives. We're not really making any progress. For every one step forward that we're making, we're taking 2 steps back. And so it can be really dangerous. And in this way, we need to learn to suspend our doubts. So accept the things that are working for you, that you're seeing transformation in. And then the things that you don't quite understand, just kind of shelf them away for a little bit until later time where you can get them out and examine them again. But don't let them keep you from progressing forward because this can be really dangerous. So then in the final 2 verses here, 41 and 42, Arjuna is urged to fight with this transcendental knowledge. So Krishna tells Arjuna to rise above doubt and act with spiritual wisdom. If we remember, he uses this analogy of the sword cutting through. So he says, just as we fight the enemy outside, we must fight within. The way to fight within is to fight without as well. So if we avoid the struggle on the outside, we'll never be able to understand the struggle within. So we can't just renounce our duty. We can't just run away. We have to confront it. so that we can have that opportunity to fight the enemy within, to even identify the enemy within. Right? So Krishna says, stand up and do your duties properly. Fight now, accrue the internal wealth without becoming bound. So he's saying, act with knowledge and you'll be purified. Following the spiritual process means not denying the activity, but using it to accrue spiritual wealth. And that's the message here. That's the final message here. If you notice, Krishna's not even really focusing on fighting, but Krishna's focused on doing your duty selflessly. That's the process. And that's how you accrue spiritual wealth. So we got through it. We did it. I'm sorry if that was a little bit fast. I think pretty much all of you have been here every time. So hopefully that was just a big review and a way to see this chapter kind of all together in its flow. But does anybody want to share any reflections from that?
Yeah, I just want to say how beautiful it is to see it all in its flow, and what an informative chapter. Just like so much is there. I love how you touched on the point of like we don't have to actively, I mean, we should still strive to, but it's not such an active process in trying to let go of like lust, greed, anger. It's noticing when these things are there, not really letting them take over, but also using it as a tool to realize, okay, I need to connect with Krishna more, so Krishna can help me let these things go. And so that's like a big thing I got from when you were talking about that. It's like, oh, when those things arise, notice them and then realize, okay, how can I connect with Krishna more so that I'm not being overtaken by these things? And so that was really beautiful there. And then just all of it, like um, the having the trust whenever, things don't go our way. And it's so difficult sometimes to just accept like, okay, this is God's plan. He is my best friend. He does have a plan for me. It's bigger than my plan. And sometimes it ends up being exactly what you wanted anyways, or sometimes it's even better than what you wanted. But it's like the test is, are you going to trust that Krishna is going to put it in your hands when it's the right timing, and let go of your own way of thinking and way of how you think it should be. And that's again a constant process, a constant acceptance, at least at this stage of where I'm at for me. But yeah, and then it's just such a beautiful chapter encompassing all those things: trust, acceptance. Really, Krishna's our best friend, and he has the bigger plan for our lives, and he's the one who helps us get rid of all of the lower nature. So beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I love what you said. I feel like you said it better than I did, so I'm grateful that you just spoke because those are really nice takeaways. Thank you, Mariah.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to share any takeaways?
Everything was so nice.
Kalpana.
Everything was so nice, and I liked so many points. And the best was about having a guru with humility, with inquisitive nature, and seva bhav, service.
Yes.
Without guru, I mean, everything, the entire chapter, everything would be like we would be in ignorance. The knowledge, how to go to guru and how to get this knowledge, and understanding why we are here, and understanding Krishna, he's there for us, his plans, everything. I mean, surrounds around having a guru and having the knowledge.
Yeah, so nice. And it makes so much sense too, right? Like if we want to learn anything in this material existence, like if you want to learn, pottery, you go to somebody that has
Right.
knows a lot about, has done it before, who's been through that whole process and knows, how to handle when you're gonna mess up, or if it turns
Right.
out like this, right? So it's the same way, the spiritual knowledge. We need to go to these people that have walked the path, that know it, who've done it before and can help us along our way. And it's such a
Right.
gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice point. Anybody else? Their takeaways? Okay. So just to run through, I'll run through, since I have 2 more minutes here, I'll run through these 6 points from this chapter. So the first, Krishna is the original teacher of spiritual knowledge. True knowledge comes through disciplic succession. Understanding Krishna's divine nature leads to liberation. Selfless action is superior to renunciation of action. Sacrifices, especially the sacrifice of knowledge, purify and elevate the soul. The way to gain this knowledge is through a guru. And then faith and devotion are essential for spiritual advancement. Those are like some of the cliff notes here. Maybe I'll just paste this into the chat in case you want to see those cliff notes in a really quick way from this chapter. Here, paste this in the chat. Okay, there you go. It's in the chat. Okay, so thank you all for coming and participating in this journey, not just listening, but participating with your minds and your hearts. And we know that's the only way for us to really transform through this knowledge. So I will see you all on Monday, and we will start chapter 5.
See you before Monday.
Yes, I'll see most of you actually that are on this call right now this weekend.
Yes.
So, wonderful. Can't wait. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Haribol.
Haribol.
Hari
Bye.
Bol,
Thank you,
Hari
guys.
Bol, Radhe Radhe.